Welcome to the Grand Theft World Podcast, hosted and sponsored by the fine members over at the grandtheftworld.com members room. Thanks for everyone for showing up for tonight's live show. We are coming to you tonight at the speed of science. This is episode 103. It is October 23rd, 2022. We have a plethora of stories tonight, a cornucopia of content that we're going to unfold over the next 6 or 7 hours with analysis and some historical deep dives so you can understand the context, make better decisions during the week. We're going to cover stories like
the efficacy actually in our three-dose vaccine in children was 80%.
You're talking about efficiency to prevent severe disease or to prevent infection?
To prevent infection.
To prevent infection.
Yes.
Just when you thought the pandemic was over, in the last pandemic, COVID killed 1%, generous number. They had to go and do the new and improved thing. Now the Boston COVID lab has one that's 80% effective, you might say. If the goal was mortality, they've raised it through gain of function to 80%. We're going to dig into that very concerning story tonight. Why are they still doing these types of experiments? Why are they doing research like this in America at all? Do we have to do it before the enemy does it? Or are these types of uses of science without consciousness, without conscience? Might that be the real type of terrorism out there?
Boston University researchers reportedly developed a more lethal strain of the COVID virus. That was according to New York Post, and had many people wondering, why are they doing that? Please stop. Don't do it. I had that reaction. I was very upset about this. So I looked through the New York Post article, and I realized that this was just based on, there was an underlying article from the Boston Herald, which was behind a paywall. So I was determined to read this to see if this was true. So I did some actual journalism, looked at the Boston Herald story, and it turns out that this headline is total BS.
A couple of things to take note of here. The school says these reports are sensationalized and taken out of context. And we actually covered the story back in 2020 when BU first got a live coronavirus sample from the first patient in Washington state. Now, at the time, researchers were trying to develop a vaccine or a treatment for COVID. In this new study, researchers in the lab created a new virus. Now, they used that original COVID strain from Wuhan and crossed it with the Omicron variant. Here's where things get tricky. Researchers found that their new strain killed 80% of mice compared to 100% of the mice killed that were given the original strain. Just a few moments ago, we spoke with Dr. Daniel Karitzis, an infectious disease expert from Brigham and Women's Hospital, who says these findings are important.
What these results show is that it is, in fact, other parts of the virus that make Omicron less virulent than the ancestral strain. It's not the spike protein itself. So it's not like they made this monster virus. That's a complete misinterpretation.
In a statement, Boston University emphasized this research is not gain-of-function research, meaning it did not amplify the Washington state virus strain or make it more dangerous.
But now there's a rumor going around that scientists in Boston in the United States have made a new SARS coronavirus 2, and instead of killing essentially 0% of the mice it infects, it kills 80% of the mice it infects. Could this rumor possibly be true? I'm afraid to tell you, and it distresses me to tell you, that it is completely true. I find this unbelievable, outrageous arrogance, but we'll take a look at it and unpick it, and we will be looking at the scientific paper, of course. Now, this is the paper here. It's actually in the form of a preprint at the moment, but given that it's pre-printed, it probably will be peer-reviewed shortly. But of course, this does mean that the research took place. It's unlikely that they're lying about this research taking place. So this is actually happening. Now, this is the most incredible, in my view, gain-of-function research. We've gone from killing none of the mice to killing 80% of the mice. Now, OK, it might not be that bad if it escapes into people. It might only kill 40% of the people that it infects, or 4% of the people it infects. We don't know. But playing with this sort of virus, to me, is just unbelievable. Now, this is the paper here. Role of the spike pathogen and antigenic behaviour. So basically, antigen is the virus, and this is in the BA1 that they looked at here. Okay, it's a few months ago now, it's moved on, but it was just published last week. Boston University School of Medicine. So they said we generated a chimeric recombination SARS coronavirus 2. And that's what they did. They took the original Wuhan type virus, the genetics from that made the core of the virus. They took the genetic material from the Omicron that generated the spike protein, and they recombined these into a brand new virus. Now, as far as I can understand, this would never have occurred in nature. So they generated this completely new virus. Given that the original Wuhan virus and the BA1, the Omicron BA1 virus killed essentially no mice, and this kills 80% of mice. And of course, we are vertebrates, the same as mice. It just doesn't bear thinking about. How would they have the arrogance to do this? So transgenic mice, they express the human ACE2 angiotensin 2 receptor that the virus binds onto, including airway epithelia, where infection typically begins, as we know, the lining tissues of the airways. Because they're susceptible to SARS-CoV-2 virus, they are used as an experimental model, basically. So it's mice. We're talking about mice with human ACE2 receptors. That's how they know that this would work in human cells, because it's the same as the ACE2 receptors that are expressed by the mice are the same as in me, because it's made by the same human gene, transgenic, humanized mice. So that's what that means. That's what this line is. Omicron cases were mild, non-fatal infections. Good in the mice. The Omicron S-carrying virus, the new one that jiggled around with what you might call the Frankenstein virus, inflicts severe disease with a mortality rate of 80%. Now, 80%, that's one more than 79%. This is massive. Just imagine if this virus escaped and it killed, worst case scenario, perhaps 80% of people. Suppose it only killed 8% of people. It would spread rapidly. We don't have immunity to it. They've already said it has huge immune escape. The vaccine-induced immunity would not work against this new virus. The natural induced immunity might work a bit better, but I don't particularly want to find out. This is just, I find this terrifying, to be quite honest. I therefore call on the American government to close this research down immediately. Immediately. Hygienically. Destroy all these Frankenstein viruses.
We also have stories like the CDC is back and they got a new and improved plan for your child's immune system. And that pandemic that killed 1% of adults and didn't really touch children, well, the kids are going to have to get jabbed to get a public school government education. If they want to participate in society, they got to take the experimental gene synthetic concoction that they're giving people. And I think that's also likewise very concerning. So these regulatory groups that are making decisions from on high, I think we have to learn how to challenge them, and we can't challenge them until we get to the news about what they're doing, and then we can make some intellectual decisions from there.
This week, the CDC Independent Advisory Board unanimously voted to put the COVID-19 mRNA jabs on the 2023 vaccine schedule, despite a massive public outcry to not include them. The board responded by saying just because they're added to the schedule doesn't mean it will be required for students to attend school. So why recommend? One thing this CNN Health article doesn't include is the rationale for including this brand new vax, which seems like a pretty important subject to cover. Thomas Massey points this out. Here's a slide from the CDC meeting today on childhood vaccines. Children 5 to 17 aren't even measurable on this graph, so why would CDC recommend COVID jabs be part of the childhood vaccine schedule? By the way, this is people in the hospital testing COVID positive, not due to COVID. Some are suggesting the motivation is the liability protection the recommendation provides. If jab makers can get approval and recommendation for children, there is permanent zero liability under the legal shield of the National VICP of 1988.
So we called the CDC and asked a simple question. Do you deny that once the COVID vaccine is added to the childhood immunization schedule, Many schools and states will require it based on your recommendation. And of course, they know that's true. We caught them lying, so they didn't even bother to respond to us because apparently we're not American citizens and don't deserve a response. Does not enhance your faith at all.
We're all still experiencing the fallout of other rushed decisions, supposedly in the name of health and science, and the corporate-controlled media has gaslit us every step of the way. Here's Bill Maher.
The pandemic erased 2 decades of progress in math and reading. See, right away, I got to say, this pisses me off. I see these headlines all the time. The pandemic didn't do that. The way we handled the pandemic did that. The pandemic certainly was a thing. But let's not just say the pandemic, because it was not written in stone that we had to handle it the way we did. They shouted down the idea that it might have escaped from a lab.
Right.
That was somehow racist,
right,
as opposed to somehow if you believed that it came from the wet markets, you were a Democrat, and if it came from a lab, you were a Republican. This is ridiculous.
The propaganda machine has been fueled by a lack of true sources. Media is given a corporate directive, and the puppets assemble to gather experts to source for their predetermined narrative.
We also have a story that I would like to call the apotheosis of Alex Jones. It's an example of what happens when society decides to attack somebody who's become, over the years, anti-fragile. Through all the attacks, he's just getting stronger and stronger. And while they laid a decision, they hope to get $2.78 trillion from Mr. Jones. I think what they've done is jump the shark. They've just shown everybody it's not about justice for the tragedies that befell those families, but rather it's about money, power, politics.
Look what they did to Alex Jones. They trying to rob him of every single thing he owns. How you get sued for a Billy for saying something wrong? They won't stop till everybody being watched by drones. And look what they did to Ye. They want everything. JP Morgan banned his account, but they do Epstein. They care more about Kanye West than they do sex rings. It's like you only have free speech if you left wing. Hey, he wore a White Lives Matter shirt with Candace Owens. She showed her bill and money winning, they both exposed them. They need to get closer to God, though, that's what I'm hoping. Because the deep state hate the stars when they can't control them. They bet Donald Trump while he was sitting president. I guess they don't care if that sets a dangerous precedent. Now they rating him and Mike Lindell without evidence. Is this still America and what it represents? And that's why I'm out here flexing while I'm slaying demons. We living in the end of times, you should show a season. Politicians betray this country, they committing treason. It's all for power, so they laughing while the country bleeding. Look what they did to Alex Jones. They trying to rob him of every single thing he owns. How you get sued for a Billy for saying something wrong? They won't stop till everybody being watched by drones.
And it's getting pretty ugly with the egregious nature of these rewards, these awards, because when you compare it to other corporations in history, and Union Carbide killed 100,000 people in India. Did they have to pay $2.78 trillion? I don't think so. So all these mega corporations with corporate personhood, they can go out and commit mass murder and genocide and not be held accountable. And some guy in Texas who moves his mouth the wrong way, $2.78 trillion.
All right, here's a story from Bloomberg. Sandy Hook families seek $2.75 trillion from Alex Jones. Jury already awarded families $965 million in damages. Judge to decide damages under state deceptive trade law. Oh, this is fascinating. So basically they're seeking what? Just about 3,000 times what they were awarded from the jury? $2.75 trillion. Let's put that into context. Here is a list of countries by GDP. You can see here, US dollars in the trillions. France, 2.77. Canada, 2.2. So Alex Jones's lawsuit falls somewhere in between Canada and France in terms of gross domestic product. Let me read this from the story. It says the family said they're entitled to that amount, 2.75 trillion, because Jones broke a state law barring the sale of products using false statements. They reached the sum by multiplying the state law's $5,000 per violation fine by the 550 million social media exposures Jones's audience received on his Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter accounts in the 3 years following the Sandy Hook incident. Literally makes no sense.
We're also going to get into some incendiary comments made against the Israelites and Hebrews this week. We'll get to Ye, but there was also Ethan Klein, who had some very caustic words leveled at Ben Shapiro, who I'm not really a fan of, but I'm a fan of humanity. And when you're expressing yourself in inhumane or unhuman ways, I think it deserves notice. I think it deserves analysis. I think it deserves people recognizing who's protected by YouTube and Susan Wojcicki, and who's banned and censored and canceled, because Klein is preserved in that YouTube infrastructure, and other people who say things that are less incendiary get deep six.
I was born in the God. I am Jewish, by the way. I was born in the God. And I hope Ben gets gassed first. I am Jewish, by the way. I was born in the God. I am Jewish, by the way. I was born in the God. And I hope Ben gets gassed first. I was born in the God. I was born in the God. I was born in the God. I was born in the God.
Well, well, well. If it isn't Mr. Consequence Culture himself receiving just a little bit of said consequence, Ethan Klein has been suspended/banned from YouTube for a period of 1 week for his, I believe, third strike in the last year, or at least second for sure. He had one 5 months ago for fantasizing about somebody going down to a convention of people he didn't like and doing something very terrible. And predictably, his meltdown has been a chef's kiss.
Also tonight, sitting in second chair, we've got the host of the Rebunk Podcast, Scott Armstrong. Scotty, how you doing?
Well, Richard, I'm doing pretty fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. Hope Tony's getting some relaxation this evening. And yeah, man, honored to be here.
Yeah, Tony's got some R&R, so we asked Scott to sit in. So we're going to be having some fresh perspectives on some of these stories. And also Ryan Christian might pop in later. It's like, you remember that Milken meeting with Fauci and the guy from BARDA, Rick, and they're on stage?
I just played that, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's good synchronicity. We've been studying synchronicity all day with the autonomy students. Yeah, can you play it?
Please, yeah.
There's a panel on stage. There's a journalist. He's asking these questions. And basically what the answers are, well, we have technology for that, but the way we do it is really old fashioned. And to get the new stuff in there would have to change the rules. And there's too much bureaucracy and we can't get it done. So what we really need is some crisis event, like a new Pearl Harbor. Wait, that's a difference. But it's the same type of thing, right? That they're like, we wish we had this thing happen that's bad for everybody, but good for our project. And then it magically happens. And we're supposed to say there's no connection. This is coincidence. Let me just add to my pile of coincidences. Do we get to spend these at some point? Do we get social credit for coincidence? Because there's a lot of them. And it's a piece of history. Now, if I remember correctly, it came from October 2019, which is about the same time they were running Event 201 across town or wherever, because they were holding Event 201. I forget where they held it. Maybe I never knew that part. Maybe I should learn that part. But Event 201 was a real thing. It's an exercise they held in October 2019 that 85 or 84% predicted what was going to happen. And it might be like one of those Peter Power 7-7. We went, from the drill of this exercise into the real time. The thing happened while we were conducting the drill or exercise. We went from slow time thinking to quick time acting, I think was the quote. Okay, we got it lined up. C-SPAN, thank you. And go ahead, Mixmaster Ryan.
Why don't we blow the system up? I mean, obviously we can't just turn off the spigot on the system we have and then say, hey, everyone in the world should get this new vaccine we haven't given to anyone yet. But there must be some way that we grow vaccines mostly in eggs, the way we did in 1947.
In order to make the transition from getting out of the tried and true egg growing, which we know gives us results that can be, beneficial. I mean, we've done well with that, to something that has to be much better. You have to prove that this works, and then you've got to go through all of the clinical trials, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3, and then show that this particular product is going to be good over a period of years. That alone, if it works perfectly, is going to take a decade.
There might be a need or even an urgent call for an entity of excitement out there that's completely disruptive, that's not beholden to bureaucratic strings and processes.
So we really do have a problem of how the world perceives influenza, and it's going to be very difficult to change that unless you do it from within and say, I don't care what your perception is, we're going to address the problem in a disruptive way and in an iterative way, because you do need both.
But it is not too crazy to think that an outbreak of a novel avian virus could occur in China somewhere. We could get the RNA sequence from that, beam it to a number of regional centers, if not local, if not even in your home at some point, and print those vaccines on a patch and self-administer.
And note, by the way, that it's universal flu vaccine, right? So this is pre-COVID. They're talking about, and the whole point is they were hyping this idea of the same thing they're building for COVID right now for flu the whole time. And they also argue that will eventually go into like a one-stop shop vaccine for everything. That's the mRNA platform.
Yeah, it's the whole mRNA developed by DARPA platform, and they were seeking for a way to use it. And the guy from Rick Bright from BARDA, he's the guy who could put stuff like that into action. So to have those people on stage, we might also get to a clip from the first week of Jay Dyer's Philosophy 101 course. It's currently in production. We might have a little sample, because I did see a sample of it air in another podcast over the weekend, so we might be able to play that.
Ready, set, go.
And so the clip that I picked to show you now is just Jay sort of giving the intention of the lesson and the course, and saying what he's planning to teach us over the next 12 weeks. So Jerry, if you could pull that clip up and play that, please.
Have me, Rich. Really cool to be here. I did, when I was doing undergrad and grad work, I did teach quite a few student class situations, but I never taught an entire semester. I left the university setting because I really felt like I could do better doing it autonomously. And here we are at Autonomy. So I think Richard has the right idea about where to go with education. But I've been into and studying philosophy at various levels and in various ways for about 20 years. So I'm happy to be here, honored to be here. I do have some unique takes that I think will be different than what you would get in a traditional legacy university setting. So hopefully we can get into some of that tonight, kicking it off, and we're going to get pretty deep. So, jot down your questions. I'm a big fan of open Q&A at the end. We've done in my Discord, I think we have about 8,000 or 9,000 in the Discord. And we've been doing these open Q&As that go sometimes 6-10 hours. So I'm totally used to that. Very happy to have people ask, lengthy end of lecture Q&As. So be sure and jot down your questions, and I will answer them to the best of my abilities. You're not going to offend me. It's not going to bother me if you disagree, if you think I'm wrong about something, you don't like, we're not going to be talking a whole lot about theism or any of that tonight. That doesn't really play into tonight's topic. So if you're anti-theist, if you're agnostic, none of that bothers me. It's fine for you to, have your positions. I'm not going to be coming at you or critiquing your positions unless you want that. Right. So you can request that, sir. I would like to request a demolishing of my paradigm. I'm happy to offer that if you want that. Most people don't really want that, but tonight's going to be an introduction. So we're going to look at what is philosophy all about. The object of this course will be to take us from this introductory situation to a pretty good knowledge, a deep knowledge, hopefully, that's what we're going to shoot for, of the history of Western philosophy. Obviously, we have to pick some starting points. We can't go back and do all of Indo-European philosophy. We can't do all the Babylonian, Assyrian philosophy and whatnot. But what's most relevant, I think, for us in the West is the history of Western philosophy. And like I said, I've had this course at the legacy institutional setting many times over, and in many different ways. So I'm going to give you a better version of that. And I think, again, this is really the way to do it. Really, Richard is really pioneering when it comes to where education is going. So let's get into philosophy. What is philosophy? Well,
it's going to get really exciting. Be sure to hang out. We're going to go first to Luke Radowski of thebestpoliticalshirts.com, and we'll be right back after his weekly summary.
Wow, absolutely crazy footage coming out of Ukraine, and who would have thought? Even Russian fighter pilot jets need dash cams in their vehicles.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions. We can get into the show and share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.